So how does Trump winning actually bode for the Philippines? I do think there is a slight advantage for the Philippines now that Trump is coming in as the new US president. A Trump presidency means we will likely have less tensions with China over the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea or whatever anyone wants to call it. Okay guys, the USA has a new president. Donald Trump, who was previously the 45th president of the United States of America, is now the 47th president as well, being the second US president to have won a non-consecutive term after Grover Cleveland, who served in both 1884 and 1892, serving as both 22nd and 24th president of the United States of America. And as it turns out, Donald Trump won with quite a margin, shattering the original predictions about a supposed close fight, even destroying the famous election oracle Professor Alan Lichtman's predictions of a Kamala Harris win.
You know, my prediction system is unique, and as you said, it's been essentially right for 40 years. And I finally come to my final prediction and concluded that the White House party, the Democrats, now represented by Kamala Harris, would not lose any more than 5 keys. Thus, my prediction is Kamala Harris will be a precedent-breaking president of the United States, the first woman president in U.S. history.
As Trump won with a total of 295 Electoral College votes versus Kamala Harris's 226 Electoral College votes. And in this case, Trump also won the popular vote with around 73.4 million votes in total, representing 50.7% of all votes cast, with Harris getting a total of around 69 million votes in total, representing 47.7% of all votes cast. Trump is the first Republican presidential candidate in 20 years to have won the popular vote, the last Republican president being George W. Bush in 2004 during his re-election bid against the Democratic challenger John Kerry. Now, what does a Trump win mean? Well, to be absolutely honest, I have no dog in this fight, and I'm not an American, and I have no reason to take sides in this contest. Heck, I've long been quite annoyed by Trump's style. Okay, let me sound a little less like an American. So I really have no business caring about how the USA is governed, as I don't live there. Though I do care enough about my relatives and friends in the USA, but what I really do care about is how all this affects us outside the States.
The world eagerly and anxiously awaiting the results of the 2024 U.S. presidential election. The stakes are high for the Philippines and Asia in particular, which heavily rely on Washington for security and defense amid an increasingly aggressive China.
So how does Trump winning actually bode for the Philippines? Well, I do think there is a slight advantage for the Philippines now that Trump is coming in as the new US president. Immediately, one pressing thing comes to mind. A Trump presidency means we will likely have less tensions with China over the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea or whatever anyone wants to call it. We've repeatedly been goaded by the USA to be their puppet vis-a-vis China. We've had this with Obama's administration goading the Noynoy administration to be hostile towards China, and yes, recently with the Biden administration doing the same thing to the current Philippine administration. Under the Duterte administration, which also coincided with the first Trump term, tensions and hostilities between the Philippines and China were largely non-existent, and our relatively cordial relations with China didn't cause the USA to take offense, as the Trump administration of the USA also maintained cordial relations with the Duterte administration of the Philippines. Our fishermen could easily access shared traditional fishing grounds like Scarborough Shoal and many others without much hassle, as a so-called modus vivendi was reached between the then Duterte administration and the People's Republic of China. So we know that the first Trump administration didn't goad the Philippines under President Duterte into maintaining hostilities with China, but this all changed when Biden came along in 2021 and then pressured the new Philippine administration that came in 2022 under President Bongbong Marcos to pivot towards a more hostile stance toward China. I'm just basing this off of Trump's previous international policy and many of his recent and other long-time pronouncements. We all know that Trump has always been a businessman. He's more into trade and business deals and just essentially wants to get the economy booming. So to him, war and military tensions represent wasteful monetary expenditure and a waste of time.
I will settle the war in Ukraine, and I will end the chaos in the Middle East, and I will prevent something that nobody else will be able to do. I will prevent World War III, and you are very close to World War III. Biden and Kamala got us into this war in Ukraine, and now they can't get us out. They can't get us out.
Look at Trump's stance towards the war in Ukraine. Trump says he's going to do whatever he can as president to sign a deal with Vladimir Putin that would put an end to the war. Too bad for Ukraine, because this deal might mean a loss of eastern Ukrainian territory after so many Ukrainians already lost their lives because of the war. Let's recall that when Trump was around in his first term, Putin didn't do anything to act up. There was a modus vivendi. It's kind of like Trump was able to get Putin to respect him enough to not do anything crazy. But it was when Biden came in and repeatedly bragged about expanding NATO and poking Russia with what are essentially existential threats of bringing NATO right in front of Russia's doorstep by seeking to convert Ukraine into a NATO member instead of a neutral buffer state, that this whole war in Ukraine thing happened. Biden, who was seen as weak and senile, couldn't even control Netanyahu's moves in the Middle East. But that wouldn't be the case with Trump, as Netanyahu is thankful to Trump for moving the US embassy to Jerusalem, thereby granting Netanyahu the gesture of legitimacy he so wanted. Let's also not forget that it was Trump who helped to get the Abraham Accords going, which got two Arab Muslim countries in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, to establish friendly diplomatic relations with Netanyahu's country. Less conflict, less tensions equals better for business and trade. Just looking at that tells us all about Trump's aversion to war and wasteful military hostilities, and it's obvious that he'd want the same vis-a-vis China. Yes, of course, there was a trade war, and there are these tariffs that Trump wants to impose on goods from China, but the Chinese don't take real offense at that. Business is business, and economic competition is different from military hostilities and existential threats. And Trump isn't into the latter too. Like a shrewd businessman, he's more into forging win-win deals. On that alone, we in the Philippines will have a bit of a slight advantage because we will have less conflicts and less tensions with China. But of course, that requires the Philippine side to play our cards right. We really shouldn't unnecessarily provoke China. If you all recall, we didn't have those untoward incidents happening during President Duterte's term, and I do think Trump will seriously avoid wasting time and money trying to goad us into more conflict and hostilities with China. Now that was the first slight advantage. Now for the second slight advantage, Trump seeks to bring the price of oil down by increasing the supply of oil. Many of his pronouncements, both past and present, are all about the need to keep energy costs low. Back during Trump's first term, despite heavy sanctions on Iran, his administration granted temporary exemptions to 8 countries to allow them to continue importing Iranian oil. These 8 countries are China, India, Italy, Greece, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Turkey. This eased the supply of oil, allowing the price of oil to be lowered, thus benefiting industries all over the world, the Philippines included. That in itself is another slight advantage for us with Trump as the new US president. This is something that we should take advantage of in our bid to industrialize our country. But again, we shouldn't waste our chances. We should do whatever we can to really get rid of whatever restrictions in both legislation and in the Constitution that are discouraging global corporations and other international investors from coming into the Philippines, getting them to come in droves to set up factories and offices and creating lots and lots of jobs. We should be able to take advantage of the lower oil prices to get our electricity costs lower so that we can indeed make it a lot cheaper and easier for us to industrialize. Peace and the avoidance of hostilities with China, as well as lower oil prices thanks to Trump's clear policy of avoiding useless and wasteful military conflict and tensions, as well as his goal to increase oil supply and thus lower oil prices, bode well for the Philippines and for Filipinos. These by themselves should free us up and allow our country to focus on economic development. There may be other key reasons that may pose a slight advantage to us, but those are the two main ones I feel very strongly about, which I know will have a solid positive effect on the Philippines if we know how to take advantage of the scenario. My name is Orion Perez Doom Doom, and this is PGMN.